सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Hari Om. Yesterday in our earlier video we saw that in order to define a religion, there are 4 parts to it to define. The first one, define God. The second is the scripture. The third are the commandments or do's and don'ts. Fourth, the prophet. So we briefly introduced each one of this. Now let us take in-depth analysis of each one of them. The way in our Sanatana Dharma we would define God, it is neither monotheistic nor polytheistic. It is in fact one monotheistic principle expressing in polytheistic God forms. When it is said that it is one monotheistic principle expressing in various different forms, what are the implications of this statement? It means that there is one form of God which is supreme, Paramatma, Param meaning supreme, Atma the self, the supreme self. That supreme self has the capacity to express and expand into various forms. It is not just that these gods or God forms are the expression of that supreme, but this entire universe is nothing but the expression of that supreme alone. Antar bahischa tat sarvam vyapya narayana sthitaha. Inside, outside, every single ounce, every single particle of this universe is nothing but that Paramatma in a different modification. So that Paramatma with respect to the creation is called Brahma, with respect to maintaining it is called Vishnu, and in order to recycle it is called Rudra or Shiva. Which means that all these various God forms are nothing but invocation of that supreme with respect to what they are related to. Like for example, when I stand in front of my father, I become their son. When I am in front of my brother, I become a brother. So as many relationships that I stand in front of, that relationship invokes that expression through me. Similarly, this entire creation is an expression of that supreme alone. What is the difference? If everything is that supreme alone, why is it that in this world, in this creation, there is so much of chaos? In order to understand this, let us not be very judgmental and invoke the wrong meanings. Instead, understand that the entire creation is nothing but divine in its presence, in its existence. But we seldom see that divinity. Because of our own mind, we start seeing the entire world in the layers of our likes and dislikes, creating a layer of good, bad, and polarity in the world which is essentially divine. So the entire creation, every particle, sentient and insentient, that which is mobile, that which is immobile, everything is nothing but that Paramatma alone. So what is the implication of it? The implication of it would be very simple, that whenever we deal with anything in this world, whenever we deal with any particle of this world, deal with it, interact with it with such sincerity that you are very much in the presence of that supreme alone. Nothing but that supreme alone. If I am that supreme, why is it that none of the qualities of that supreme are seen in me? As I earlier said, it is because of our own mind. Our mind, with its layers of likes and dislikes, which form the tendencies and vasanas, which probably in later chapters we will definitely discuss on, we see nothing but fragmented particles in this world. Because of this fragmented existence, Though we are divine, we see ourselves as fragmented individuals. Individuality creeps in. This individuality, as long as it exists, the divine does not shine through. Realizing this divine centered within the core of our own being is called realization. Knowing that I am that Paramatma alone, I am that existential reality alone. Until I realize that, the layers of likes and dislikes that I carry forces me to carry forward these imprints, not just from this day to next day, from this year to next year, but from various lives I carry it forward until I consciously sit down to sublimate each one of these layers of likes and dislikes. It is not that the Mahatmas don't have likes and dislikes. They do not make a habit of, or they do not become addicted to these layers of likes and dislikes. Whereas we are bound, we are colored in our vision in looking through these likes and dislikes. And this very principle, in a very broader spectrum, is called reincarnation. As long as these vasanas or tendencies exist, we keep taking birth from one life to the other. Now this creation which is maintained by Lord Vishnu, created by Lord Brahma, in his effort to maintain this universe, has to come down to this universe in an all-consuming divine form, which is called incarnation or avatara. This avatara comes down into this world of being as human as we are, but with a spectacular clarity that I am that Brahman, that Supreme Paramatma alone. Their job is very simple: to maintain this idea of balance in this world, whether it is at a material sense or a spiritual sense. To rebuild that balance is this avatar's main task. Not that it's just Vishnu, but Brahma and Shiva also take various avatars. These avatars' main job is to create that balance. Lord Vishnu himself must have taken more than 40 or 50 avatars, of which the 10 are most prominent ones: Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Narasimha and all. The way I look at it is, if you take a director, now the director has directed maybe 10, 50, 60, 80, 100 movies. When you talk of his lifetime achievement, we talk of the top 10, best 10. Similarly, for Lord Narayana, the blockbusters, as I would call it, are these 10 main avatars. Through these avatars, he strikes the balance in this world of constant change that is happening. So I have tried to explain that it is this form of God who expresses and expands in this universe, and every particle is nothing but divine. Good and bad is because of our own mind, our own way of thinking, our way of looking at it, and that this Paramatma comes down into this universe as avatar to strike that balance. Now, as an individual who is trying to seek that utmost purity of supreme within, the core of my own being, how do I put an effort? How do I relate to that God? There are two aspects to this question. How do I relate to that God, and how do I make sure that I strike that balance within my own self? So the first aspect, Lord Hanuman was once asked by Lord Rama himself as to, "O Hanuman, when you look at me, how do you relate to me? How do you invoke me in your presence?" So Lord Hanuman's answer, with such crystal clarity, he said, "Deha drishtya tu dasoham, jiva drishtya tvad amshakah, atma drishtya tavaivaham iti me nishchitamatihi." Deha drishtya, from the standpoint of the physical body, I am your servant, you are my master. This is the Dvaita philosophy. Jiva drishtya, from the aspect of the soul or the jivatva, I am nothing but a part of you. You are the whole and I am a chip of that whole, a small little particle of that whole. So I see various aspects of that Supreme start reflecting in this individuality, but not in completeness, but it has its own incompleteness all through. Even then, I relate to that Lord as I am a part of that Supreme and I am a servant still. Now, from the absolute standpoint, Atma Drishtya, Tavaivaham, I am you and you are me, there is absolutely no difference. So, with these three standpoints, the three main ideological differences in Sanatana Dharma are stated forward. It is called Dvaita, which is the physical aspect. From the Jiva, the soul standpoint, it is called Visishtadvaita. And from the absolute standpoint, it is called Advaita Tattva, Advaita Paramatma. How do I reach to that core? We will have to first analyze as to what are we essentially. We as human beings essentially have three instruments: body, mind and intellect. From the physical aspect, to purify, it is called Karma Yoga. From the emotional aspect, to purify and reascertain our core of being is called Bhakti Yoga, redirecting our emotions towards that higher altar. From the Jnana Drishti or the Jnana Marga, path of knowledge, we strike the balance by understanding that I am that Supreme alone. And this is how the concept of God is understood from its absolute sense to the most individualized manner. That is why we see various forms of gods in Hinduism. Now, in our next dialogue, we will see as to what are scriptures and what are the purposes of these scriptures. Until then, Hari Om.